Well, hello everyone, and happy Grogladays, as usual. But not as usual, because our usual flow to this show is each episode we pick a rogue type game, a roguelike, a roguelite, if you will, uh, and then we talk about them, and we retch and we rave and we rank, and we don't do that this week because we're on break, baby. It's holiday
Woo
time.
woo! Merry holiday to you too.
And for this special entrance into our podcast catalog, we got some fun stuff coming down the chimney at you. But before we do all that, I am your mythological gift giver for the episode, Scott Berger, and with me are my naughty or nice co-hosts.
It's me, Colin, otherwise known as Celebrimbor, Forger of the One Ring, Santa's helper.
And I am Andrew Yule Cat Harshman. Look that up. That's some fine Icelandic mythology.
Yule Cat. Well, we have two things that we'll do for this episode. First, we're gonna jump into a developer interview with a previous episode that we've reviewed, Warsim, the Realm of Aslona, the solo developer for that, Huw. And then after that, we'll jump into some listener emails that we've gotten. So first, let's seamlessly transition into another audio file recording with our developer interview. All right, well, we are joined here with our very special guest, our only guest on the podcast that we've had thus far, and I think a great inaugural one. We are joined by our previous episode, Warsim, the Realm of Aslona, solo indie dev, Huw. And if I'm butchering your name, Huw, I apologize, but
Oh man,
your
you got it
last
spot
name,
on.
yeah, the first name, oh boy, but your last name, Huw Millward?
Yeah, that's right. I got the
Yes.
Welsh first name and then some English colonial second name, so we're all good.
Those crumpet eating bastards.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
bloody neighbors.
Yeah, so thanks for taking the time across all sorts of time zone craziness to join us for today. If people are listening to this and they're saying, "Oh, well, I haven't listened to your Warsim episode before," Huw, can you give us a one sentence description of what Warsim is all about?
Oh, I don't think I can.
If you can boil it down,
I
all
always
that stuff
struggle
down.
to actually describe it, to be honest. I feel like other people tend to get it better than me. It's a very strange game that's kind of inspired. Oh, do you know? I'm already one sentence over, man. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't think it's just a fucking.
It's a very
weird
strange game. There you go. That's
Yeah, there we go. Boom. I think that does summarize it.
Well, one of the reasons why we picked Warsim up to talk about before was because it is a very unique game. It's a very text-based, very console like command console terminal based game. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, it is a very kind of colony management Ascii sim with insane levels of randomization and procedural generation, I think. And yeah, I think at the time that we had reviewed it, Will was just overflowing with praise, and
Absolutely.
Colin didn't really get it, and yeah, I thought, like, for our winter special here that we're kind of buffering out, time to give my lovely co-hosts a little bit of a break from constantly reviewing video games. Thought, well, it'd be a good idea to kind of, we always get requests from listeners. When are you going to have developers on the show? And I'm always kind of nervous about having a developer come on the podcast, and if one of our podcast co-hosts was meh or didn't like the game, having to navigate that. But I think, yeah, like Warsim, every time I've opened it has always been a fun and insane experience where the world of the text generation, I think, really helps to bring the imaginative possibilities to the fore. And it's just, like you said, it's crazy. And it's like every time I open it, I'm like, all right, this time I'm definitely going to do this thing. And I wound up going down an hour long rabbit hole of trying to do political negotiations between half fungi horses and demonic orcs as you do. So, um,
Yeah, sounds about right, to be honest. Yeah, I
but yeah,
play it sometimes
maybe
myself, man, and I honestly find some stuff that I've totally forgotten is in there all the time. Catches me off guard. Like that's years of very random, sporadic adding things here and there. Sometimes maybe when I'm under the influence.
I mean that's the best time to be developing, right? It's like the right drunk edit sober approach.
Well, I don't know. It depends. You come back the next day and there's a bunch of bugs that you don't know how they're there, and you wonder who wrote that code. That's not so good. Coming up with ideas though, that's a better thing. But yeah, bringing them to light, definitely not
Mhm.
when you make some absolutely garbage code.
Yeah,
But hey,
and you've been at this for a long time with Warsim in particular. You had it debut in early access in 2017, and then you 1.0'd it last year. So congrats and kudos on that.
thank you.
I'm kind of curious, and I know this is always a thing that like people can never give an answer to, but over that 5 year period, you've seen it evolve a lot. Like what sort of anticipations or thoughts do you have about the next 5 years of Warsim?
I don't know. To be honest, I've thought about it, and I think that, like you say, it is something that's always evolving. But I really like don't feel like I'll ever be able to comfortably close the chapter on Warsim completely in my life. I don't know. Maybe the world will make it happen at some point. Like I have finally started looking at working on future projects and things. Um, but yeah, I mean it keeps ticking along. People keep playing it and enjoying it, and it's for some reason been my full-time job for years and years now, and I still can't wrap my head around the fact that it's a CMD game. But hey, if the world wants to keep doing it, I'm not going to complain. Um, but yeah, so I don't know. I really enjoy the game, and I think obviously there's certain things in it that are random enough that it doesn't get stale for me, but there are areas of it that do, and so I'm always tweaking and trying to change and add things. And there's a list of maybe 2,000 odd solutions and fixes and additions that people have suggested or come up with over the years that is still making this ginormous list that I need to look through and think, that was a good idea though. Maybe I could add that, and that's another 2 weeks. So I think it's always going to be there, even if it takes a sort of lesser role in my life and isn't something I focus on programming or developing as intently. I think it's still going to be there to some degree. Obviously, bug support, that sort of thing. But I don't know. I mean, 5 years ago, I would have thought that I probably would have finished with it within a few months, maybe a year, and then 4 or 5 years on, it's a completely different game and bigger than it ever was before in community, in total amount of people that have played it, and in what the game is itself. I look back at the really, really old versions of it. I kind of cringe, to be honest. Fuck, this was shit. This was total garbage. But yeah, nah. I don't know.
What
It's a really
features?
hard one to estimate.
Yeah, what features in particular are you looking back and you say, "Wow, I can't believe this game existed without these features. These have these additions have really made the game transform into something that's way better."
I think the easiest one to say, like, as that specific thing would be the throne room. It was a total afterthought. It was not intended to be part of the game whatsoever. And I saw something that did something similar in a game called Sort the Court, an indie game, and I thought, oh, that's really fun. And so I added a little sort of mini thing in there, just to play around with it, and it was kind of fun. And I kept expanding it, and I think in the end there were maybe 150 different throne room encounter base types, with then within them loads of different variants. Some would have hundreds of variants. Some would have obviously just pure proc gen, and it just ended up being chaos. But people would always say, "Oh, it's getting a bit samey. Oh, I'm getting a few similar encounters," and I'd be like, "Shit, got to add another 50 new encounters." But it was never intended to be a main part of the game, and the amount of people that have sort of said it's the main thing they enjoy has blown my mind. And I'm like, bloody hell, I'm really glad I did add that now, because it was definitely not even remotely intended to be part of the thing. But I think it does sort of get you involved in the world on a sort of grassroots level.
Yeah, for me, it definitely like I was booting it up on my Steam Deck last night, and you would think that this is a game that would not fare well on the Steam Deck, but somehow it does work insanely well because someone has a custom controller config that just maps like a 0 to 9 numeric scroll wheel to the left trackpad,
Wow,
and it's just like scroll 9, hit A, scroll 8, hit A.
amazing.
It works so seamlessly. And yeah, like sitting there just okay, boot up throne room. All right, advisors, what am I supposed to be doing today? Oh, you should go invade this goblin camp. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. Yeah, it has become kind of a core piece to how I interact with it. But yeah, there's so much craziness going. I think either between like the throne room or gambling my fortunes away in the arena are probably the two major pillars. But yeah, so like as you're going through and you're adding all these things and taking feedback from the community and stuff, like that's a lot of brain power that's involved with all that. And in that kind of creative enterprise, like what do you do to stay inspired, or like where does that kind of creative juice come from for you?
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, so for creative energy, I mean, I try and reply to everyone, and I think when I see a buzzing and active community, that's probably the biggest fuel I could ever have. So when there's lots of people sharing stuff, or people share their memes, or they share something that's just gone wrong, or some weird thing that's been spat out by the proc gen in their world, I always find that so inspiring. And when I see any kind of fan art, anything like that, it always makes me so happy. I mean, I try and reply to everything, but obviously sometimes I'm having to bookmark things that are massive essays that I don't have the mental energy to face maybe today, but I don't want to forget it. So I've got sometimes that builds up to hundreds of things, but I always get there in the end. But yeah, I think seeing the community, that's probably the biggest inspiration that makes me work on it. Sometimes I'll take a break from Warsim and I'll go back and have a little play through it, and I'll start thinking, oh man, you know, it'd be really fun if I could do this. And then it gives me the motivation. And I think the problem is that I indulge in that maybe too much. And then I don't focus on the things I need to finish, but instead I'm like, oh, I've got a new cool idea. Let's open this rabbit hole. But now that rabbit hole also needs to be wrapped up. And so I've spent some time trying to catch up on my own little rabbit hole creations that I've done. But at the same time, I've also got another 12 rabbit holes that I want to open. So you know, it is what it is.
The curse of creativity there. Yeah, I guess
Indeed.
to expand on that, I'm a little curious as to how you sort of spun up and cultivated those communities. Because I think like in terms of indie dev community engagement, like you are at like the top. You are sitting on the throne in the throne room of like,
hell yeah.
I see anything related to Warsim, boom, there's Huw there talking and responding to comments and stuff about it. Very much a he's here, he's there, he's everywhere.
I mean, he's on our podcast, and our podcast,
know.
I mean, is as popular as it is.
The
Wildly
69th most popular video game podcast in Germany, as it turns out. I mean,
wow,
he's everywhere.
Such accolades.
Vita's in.
Yeah. But yeah, so like if someone there, I see this all the time. People are coming out with a new indie game, and they're super excited to share it with the community and all that. But like, how do you go from building out your indie game to building out the community around it also?
It's hard because I really have to think back to like 8 years ago when it first started, because I think that is the thing for me. It's been a slow burn. Like I actually worked on Warsim as a test project to sort of learn how to program, which is why it's in the command prompt, because I didn't even know how to draw stuff to a window. And then at some point I was like, whatever, I'm kind of bored with this. And I started working on a Wasteland game that was because I was waiting for Fallout 4 to come out, and it wasn't here yet. And I was so like, I just want to play another Wasteland game. So I worked on one myself. And I really got into that. And I was working in a bar in a hotel at the time, taking notes of every little game idea I had in between serving people. And after 6 months of working on it, the code got wiped. And it was a nightmare. Yeah, it was a real disaster. Did not know my source control very well at the time. But, you know, rookie mistake, we learn, we live. But at the time, I'd been sharing it on Reddit, and I'd been posting it on different gaming subreddits, sharing it, and just everywhere I possibly could, to be honest. I mean, I tried not to spam, but I feel like it may have even verged on that at points. I'm not sure. And that built up, and I remember getting something like 400 people subscribed to the subreddit at one point, and I really, to me at the time, having no experience with any real game dev, I was like, oh my God, I've made it. This is the dream. And then, yeah, and then obviously that all went to hell, and I thought, oh, goddamn, that's me done then. But I picked up Warsim, started working on it, and I think the same sort of story. It wasn't as fast, but at some point it started growing in the same direction. I got a few more people coming to the subreddit. I cross-post my posts to other subreddits, you know, little things here and there, and YouTube videos, any kind of coverage. And those things started growing, and at some point it eclipsed the old games total amount of people on the Reddit. I think it got to 400, 500,000, whatever. And over time, it starts developing. And I think, obviously, some people's philosophy with video games, and I've had friends who are game developers who've come up to me and said, hey, why are you still working on Warsim, man? You could dump that game, pump out another game within a year, blah, blah. And I don't respect that process. I really, I think the pump and dump game development scheme it usually produces crap. It produces stuff that people don't care about as much because you're just trying to make something just to get it out there. And I respect people at making anything, to be fair, but I think making something with passion, sometimes it takes time and there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes at the end of the day, you have something that's better for the sum of its parts then because you spent so long working on it. So, I think maybe that's the thing that's helped it in totality become what it is now, despite the fact it's a CMD game in 2023. But again, no complaints from me.
So we're not expecting a Warsim mobile port anytime soon with cutesy graphics.
Well, there definitely won't be any sequels, put it that way. And I did look into a mobile port, but it's a difficult one to pull off. Someone did manage to get it emulated through a weird bootleg Windows emulator, but unfortunately, it prints the screen out and it takes 3 seconds for every new screen to load. And obviously, that very quickly becomes very tedious. But it was cool to see that it was possible. I think the closest we'll get to any kind of mobile port is the one you were playing this morning or yesterday, whatever it was, the Steam Deck.
So I have to ask. I mean, you keep making reference. I think in a lot of your interviews, your I think in your most recent YouTube broadcast as well. That this is very much a game that runs in Windows CMD, and I'm wondering. Is that like a symbol of like pride that this is a cool, unique thing, or in hindsight, would you have structured this differently and use a different sort of framework just to give yourself more flexibility to do the porting over and all this stuff? I mean, in hindsight, it's easy to say whatever, but I'm just curious.
Oh, definitely. In hindsight, I think Warsim would have probably been a graphical game that wouldn't have gotten as far as it was because I would have avoided going in the CMD route. I think it literally came out of my lack of skills at the time, and rather than quitting and just trying to learn to do it better, I just kept expanding on the mountain of spaghetti code running out of CMD that I already had, which is, I don't know if you guys saw my my post I had on programming humor, but I posted a screenshot of my code because people were sharing a picture of their large code bases. I think someone shared that they had 50,000 lines of code in a single file. So for non-programmers, that's terrible. Like, you don't do that. That's a bad practice. Well, Warsim is 650,000 lines of code in one file. So I posted it on their subreddit and said, hey, by the way, it's a game on Steam, and everyone went fucking ballistic. And it was the single biggest day Warsim ever had for sales, bizarrely.
Wow.
And it ended up the #1 post on Reddit for 10 minutes, and then an admin or a mod must have swept it, and it went off. And I think it got 4,000 comments. It was crazy.
Huh.
But yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a source of pride that I've even gotten to the point where it still functions and it is a thing. But yeah, I definitely would have done it differently if I had the skills and abilities to obviously have not built it out of the worst possible way I could have. But hey, it is what it is. It's all gone well in the end.
There's, I guess maybe on that kind of note of quote unquote soft remasters or soft reboots in a sense. Two sort of major headliner games of the roguelike space have been Dwarf Fortress and Caves of Cud, and those both have been working with the publisher Kitfox to kind of like come in, help modernize it to some extent. I mean, Dwarf Fortress is kind of the poster child for like, mania and menus upon menus and all that kind of stuff, and the Herculean effort that I think Kitfox has put in to make it, graphical and like playable on and like Steam Deck verified and all that kind of crazy nonsense. But Kitfox is also doing a pass on Caves of Cud to do a similar kind of I don't know if they're going in and like rewriting the code base specifically, but doing a lot of like UX, UI, quality of life improvements, that kind of thing. Do you foresee something like that in Warsim's future of like needing to go back into the wacky pile of spaghetti and like try to like clean it up some to make some new features happen, or to enable some kind of future thing that would be tough to implement currently?
Well, I mean, if Kitfox wanted to have a little look at my gigantic bowl of spaghetti and have a try, they're very, very welcome to. But I think that would be a task.
Uh-huh. More of a scared straight program.
Yeah, definitely. I think they'd probably never bother doing that again after they saw Warsim's back end. But who knows? Maybe they're amazing wizards. I mean, The Dwarf Fortress code is probably a lot cleaner, but we are talking what 20 years worth of code there. Like it's a monster behemoth of a thing. So the fact they were able to make any massive changes to that is impressive. I didn't hear about the Caves of Cud thing either. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited when that because I think the Kitfox partnership is supposed to help them get across the 1.0 barrier sometime in next year 2024. So yeah, definite stay tuned for podcast listeners, and I'd be curious to take a look once they have that finally done. In the world of and kind of dovetailing off of that, like Warsim is very ASCII driven, but like I love like the style of ASCII art that's involved with it. It's not something that's very common or that you see a whole lot in these days. And I guess maybe like the traditional roguelike space involves a lot of like ASCII character symbolization of like, oh, you are this little at sign running around and using that kind of symbology. Whereas Warsim is very much more of like, here's an artistic representation of something done with ASCII art. I'm curious, like, have you engaged much with like other games that use that similar kind of art style to learn from or take notes on, or are you just kind of like thinking about, oh, how do I represent this thing in ASCII in by yourself?
I think I'm definitely inspired by other games when I see them, but I'm like, I can't remember the name of the game. There was a game that used ASCII art a little while ago, and it was really, really impressive. Like crazy scenes made in ASCII, like the whole game. And I look at that and go, well, I'm not going to be able to fucking do that. No way. But yeah, no, I think I've always just drawn random little ASCII things in the Windows notepad on my little computers whenever I've worked in like government offices and stuff. It's always been something I've done on the side. So it was really just doing that really. Just I mean, Warsim's ASCII art is it's got its own little thing, but it's definitely like for the most part simpler than some of the crazy ASCII scenes you'll see in that some artists will do. So I think it definitely straddles the middle line. And I think it's kind of found its style and I'm happy to keep it to that. But yeah, it's very, very simple, but I think especially little faces, they definitely got their own charm, haven't they?
Yeah, I
Lucky
think
there's trillions of them, but they all look the same in the end.
I love it whenever the description involves like some sort of like, you know, old crone with warts all over her face, and you just see like semicolons all over the place. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, like two games that come to mind for me are one is Sanctuary RPG, and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one's like much more of a straightforward like dungeon crawler, like hack and slash type thing, but it's all kind of text based. But it does have similarly inspired kind of ASCII as like the landscape art design. I'm like, oh man, I wish like more games would straddle this middle ground between just pure NetHack style like I joke that it almost just looks like a strong password generator vomited up on the screen. But
That's
like
a great one.
like a balance between like that end of the spectrum, like the Warsim, and where it's like, you know, you have like something I can actually look at and visualize, even though it is with characters. And then there's another one that is also kind of insane. It's not a roguelike specifically, but it is a Chinese character puzzle game that you can find on Steam that if you just type word game into Steam, I think it's like it should be obvious which one pops up because it has like some kind of Chinese character um promo art
Oh,
to
yeah.
it. But it's insane where, you know, they have this kind of like symbolic character representation of things, but there's like, and I mean I don't speak Chinese at all. So I was using like Google Lens on my my desktop screen to try have
Wow.
it like on the fly translate, and obviously not a great experience. But the way that like the trailer shows like, oh, here's how they're like using almost like the flip side of like the NetHack style like O's and Q's and L's and M's of like the individual characters as like, you know, O is like the house, and it's just like so laid out in that landscape of, you know, here are things, but they're laid out like a city grid, and it feels almost like a new kind of fork of that artistic style. Um, I guess my question here is, um, if you were graduating from Warsim into a Warsim 2 or whatever your next project might be, would you be like still on that track of the Ascii as the landscape artistic style, or would you be going in like a different turn of a direction on that theme?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if I was doing a Warsim 2, like in theory, it probably would have to have that ASCII style, at least to some degree, even if it was like partially more graphical. I don't know. But yeah, I think I'd sooner jump off a bridge than work on a Warsim 2 just because it's like I can commit that much energy.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I don't know. I just looked at this game you mentioned though, this word game. It's really fascinating. The blockiness of the Chinese characters really adds to the way they're building scenes with it. It's really cool. Never seen anything like this before.
I just got to add here that I love the ASCII art of all the characters. The procedural generation in general just gets it's such a unique way to create more experiences, like fun experiences in games, that like I just love the way that
100%.
you implemented. And I am going to take a moment here to just gush and say I think we played on this podcast, we had 15 episodes in, and I was just like, oh my god, all we do is play shit games. Like we just play bad game after bad game, and like, what the heck is this Warsim? Oh my goodness, text based. I don't know about this, but then it was just such an incredible delight. Getting the top spot on for like until we played, I think, Luck Be a Landlord, which I think was like nearly the same, and like RimWorld, I can't. It's almost on a different level with how much
Respect, yeah.
yeah.
Play.
But like for solo dev efforts, like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And I think, and I'm sorry, Scott, but I'm gonna have to just say, oh my goodness, there's a feature for not everyone. I think is the case here, but like for me in particular, that arena, and I know I posted to the subreddits, and you were all over like responding about this, but the breaking the Warsim and like how to like always, like pretty much always win the arena bets, and like just getting any game that makes me bust out a spreadsheet and be like, how do I optimize this? Like, what are all the features that are important for like discovering who's going to win? Oh, such a delight to try and like kind of got a view into your mind, I think, as like you were putting this together as like, oh yeah, this thing goes with this. And like, it's just, oh, such a fun experience to decode that. And I just want to say thank you. That was such a delight.
That means a lot, man. Thank you so much.
The walls of text, not my thing, but like
yeah, me either, to be fair.
Yeah, story. I wish I loved story. I feel like I'm missing out so much with all these like really intricate stories that were built in, but that's not my flavor. But that's totally fine, because that's
I will say this, the walls of text I kind of like getting into, because it does paint such like a very thorough description of the world. I do have to ask, are like those are all handwritten, right? Those aren't procedurally generated?
For the most part, I mean, I think it's hard to remember over the years which things have been proc gen and which things haven't. So obviously with graphics, like for faces, things like that, flags, they're all proc gen for the most part. Aside from like individual faces for specific hard-coded characters in the world. But like I know there was I think there was a newspaper in one of the main towns, the Black Market, and I'm pretty sure that's proc gen entirely. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's a few things. I think there's like I attempted a random poetry system, but it flopped hard. There's like the random phrases that kingdoms get that get randomly generated, and it's very incoherent. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I've had these little projects over the years that I've tried to slap in there, but yeah, for the most part, a lot of the words were were pre-written.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly the faces, the proc gen races, that sort of thing. Maybe the bandit groups, and then you've got a lot of random generated systems then that roll in the background that sort of blur the lines then between hard coded and not. But I love proc gen. I'd love a game that was pure proc gen. I think some people really see it as a negative because they're used to proc gen done badly, and they see it as a lazy way to do game development. And I really hate that stance, because I think proc gen any complete proc gen with no I don't know rules behind it is just noise. But if you put an intelligent rule set behind any kind of proc gen, you can build really anything that obviously spits out more content that you could ever use. And I think like the more content and the more sort of rule sets and background things you put into a proc gen system, the more intelligent it becomes, to the point where it supersedes most of the stuff that could be done without it, in my opinion, personally. But then you see games on a large scale that promote themselves for having proc gen and then do it so badly they make everyone else think proc gen is such a horrible thing, like Starfield.
That came to my mind first, and there was what was before No Man's Sky, I think, when at least in its early days. I haven't played it.
Yeah, the starter thing. I mean, I actually got banned from the Starfield subreddit for posting a meme about how their proc gen planets were literally copy pasting the same dungeons every 3 seconds.
Oh no,
it's so depressing. I really wanted to enjoy that, but yeah, I don't know. I literally worked on a proc gen exploration system a week prior to playing Starfield and saw that I think I'd spent more time designing. I mean, obviously, what they have to do isn't just making a little ASCII thing on the screen. So full respect to that. Obviously, it's much easier for me. But when it comes to the systemic side, I thought it was really, really empty and really disappointing. I don't know, really surprised me. But hey, there we go. Another bit of proc gen washing as it goes.
Yeah, there's another indie effort. I think this is a solo dev effort. A game, I think it's now mostly on Steam. They have a free demo on their website called Space Engine. And it's always, I use it as basically planetarium software now, but a big portion of it is procedurally generated star systems and planets and things like that. And it's all going for like very extreme realism and all those things. But I always find it funny that like you have these AAA game dev studios that you think would specialize in this kind of thing. And admittedly, like Space Engine, it's not being designed as like an MMO or like game-oriented activities. And so literally all the planets are actually barren, but you know, but the level of interestingness with how those planets are constructed all feel so very unique. And I haven't played Starfield yet, but I mean, I don't know, like maybe if it goes deep on sale or something, I could be convinced. Or yeah, I don't know. Or if there's a
Game Pass,
space, yeah. Oh well, yeah, that. Or if like different planets are added to Skyrim, maybe that would be up my alley. But yeah, I guess like yeah, that's always an interesting thing about games that have randomness labeled as proc gen with very little procedure behind their literal generation instead of, oh, well, you just have a bunch of random things and you got to pick from one, proc gen.
Well, all that matters is how many billions of planets you can say you can visit.
Exactly.
I mean, or trillions, just like, oh, look at all the permutations possible. That makes a good game, right?
It's
exactly what I do with trillions of faces in Warsim. There's trillions of faces and millions of races. Please buy my game.
That actually reminds me. I think that's one of the things I really loved about Warsim is that I feel like you and I would probably approach like the game development in a very similar way. I have in a Google Sheet somewhere a monster name generator, which was based on something in Diablo. I noticed it was always the blank of blank. It always had the structure to it. And so you could just like basically pull syllables from like Russian and like Klingon and kind of like all these languages that kind of have hard sounds. Just pull syllables together and then like creatures and then just like basically say, okay, give me a random permutation. And you get these really unique creature names and you can just assign properties to like, if they're flaming, then they have this much damage. And like, it's just such a fun way to get to, and now we have trillions of possibilities. And it's fun to just like keep rolling the dice and like, this creature here, what can we have it do? And I like this approach in general to, and it's not just the randomization. It's just like this as a mechanic that you build something on top of, I think is a really fun way of approaching world development.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I've tried to approach it, man. So me and you would have been on the exact same wavelength.
Well, I've got a question from one of our co-hosts who couldn't make it this morning because they're quote unquote working and they have a job. Andrew wanted to ask which feature for Warsim was the hardest for you to cut?
The cut? I don't know if I've cut anything from Warsim, to be honest. I think that's the problem, maybe, that I've maybe that's why we're here for 8 years. I don't really cut anything. I mean, or is that, maybe that's a lie. There's been like tiny little areas that have been sort of left so badly partially done that I've just given them a snip and no one's noticed really. But yeah, no, for the most part, any feature that was for the most part added was seen through and added, which is why it's still being developed after 8 years.
maybe
Yeah, not many
to
cuts made here. Maybe I should have made cuts. I don't know.
well, it seems to have been working so far. I guess maybe to pivot on the question, is there anything that you would want to implement that your current build is kind of limiting you from doing?
Hmm. I don't know, to be honest. I feel like I kind of have the mentality that I know what can be added and I know what would be obviously create. Like someone's like, hey, can you make it an MMO? No, fuck off. But obviously for the most part, everything else easily addable with enough time and effort. So I'm always thinking and considering of things that could make it better. I think the one issue that I have, which really always seems to elude me, is remembering balance when adding whole new sections of the game. And it's like, how does this actually affect the flow of the game for someone? And it's like, well, maybe I added something that can be exploited to make things take way less time, and suddenly the whole balance has been thrown off. And I think that's the one thing. Maybe that's a bit of a solo dev building a big old thing and not being able to keep an eye on all of the moving parts thing. But that's probably been my biggest problem is seeing how the game has evolved over the time I've added these things, and suddenly people are able to do things very differently, very quickly, and exploit certain things in very different ways. Where I've been like, crap, I really did not consider that whatsoever. And difficulty modes definitely have changed, where something that used to be really hard is now maybe not so hard, or maybe even vice versa in some instances.
But when people
But
find these, they post it to the subreddit or to the Discord, and you see it, and then basically, is that the balance mechanism that's currently in place?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely keep an eye on that. I mean, I think the biggest thing is if a lot of people are saying the same thing, that's usually sets an alarm off my head where I'm like, I should probably pay attention to this at least. And I always try and listen, but I think that I've said this a few times. I really genuinely thought getting into game development that, like, as with the internet, as with comments, trolls, things like that, you probably get, most people talking a lot of nothing, and a few people that might have some good points, but it is really hard to find someone who has a bad take with anything, because they're passionate about it, they enjoy it, and even if you're not enjoying it and you're angry, that's a passion. Do you know what I mean? So like I found a lot of positive interactions with people who've left bad reviews for Warsim, where they've said something, and even if it's vitrolic, they've put something in there that I'm like, okay, I see what you're saying though. That is a good point. Like it really does drop off at that point, or that feature really could be expanded, or that element of the game really. I see where you're coming from, and I have a little chat, and before you know it, they're giving me better tips than I've heard in years, and they're changing their review to positive and apologizing to me. And the game's better because of it too. So hey,
One thing that I've noticed with doing a lot of data deep diving for this podcast is that a lot of like the indie roguelike games that I have in this humongous spreadsheet, there's so many of them that have so few reviews to them. Like you would think like, oh, like all these games have thousands and thousands of reviews, they're all so popular and all that. Um, let's see, I can't go a podcast episode without rattling off some inanely boring stats here. But apparently 50% of rogue style games in any capacity on Steam have 6 reviews or fewer,
wow,
and 25% have 56 or fewer. Or no, wait, no, I got that backwards. Even worse, the top 25% of all of those games have at least 56 reviews.
wow.
So I'm curious from your perspective, like in terms of building up that marketing hype around a game, is it like a sound strategy to try to like give out review keys to people to get them to review your game and get eyeballs on it, or is it more about that kind of or like that very direct messaging to people in those kind of communities? Do you think there's like an advantage of one over the other?
So it's kind of hard to tell when you do a lot of different things what it is that's actually bearing fruit, when it's just you look at Steam and go, oh, a lot of people have bought it today. It's hard to tell exactly where things have come from. Sometimes there's a very obvious reason. Like if I did this podcast and I've done nothing else for a week and suddenly 20 million people buy Warsim, I'm like, well, this is all that happened today. So it's definitely come from this, right? And I know that's going to happen. So thank you guys. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm a big fan of the throw everything at the wall and see what sticks kind of approach, as long as you're not stepping on any toes or spamming. So I'm a big believer in sending Steam keys and review keys to anyone who I think deserves it, really. And so I tried to hit up, I think maybe everyone who's played Dwarf Fortress publicly that I could find that I thought it's a similar game. Maybe they'll be willing to try it. Other similar games, every media outlet I could find that I thought was relevant. YouTubers in general that covered the same genres of gaming, maybe things like that. People online that were posting forum post threads, things like that. Just literally everything I possibly could to see what worked. And I think over the years, surprisingly, not many things worked crazy well, but a lot of things worked a little bit well over time. And I think, you post a post somewhere on Reddit and you get 3 people a day that happen to see it, and one of them maybe buys the game or something, and maybe 0 of those people review it. But you've got enough little things like that all over the internet. It's filtering and feeding through people from these little internet tubes all over the place. And if there's enough of them, it forms a sea where there's always some people coming through from all over the place. And then those people do it. I think the average sale tends to not be a review. I'm not sure what the ratio is. I'm pretty sure lately Steam has made changes that make the review quantities higher per customer than it used to be. But even now, obviously, it's probably less than 1 in 10. But yeah, I think it's just really come from trying to reach as many people as possible and try everything. And sometimes you try something, and even if it doesn't work, you can see why it hasn't once you've tried it, and maybe go, well, maybe if I tried it this way. So it's always evolving. There's always more things you can do. I've still got a massive amount of things on my Warsim marketing list of hit these people up, message these people, try this, do this, go here, do that. But obviously, I've only got one 24-hour day.
Scott, I gotta ask you, because I mean, you might have this in front of you, or you might just know, but I have to believe there's some relationship between the overwhelmingly positive and like the ratio of reviews to people who purchase the game. So, which is to say that if you just create a game that people love, then you're more likely to get like a lot of reviews. And so, step one, easy, just create a game that people love, that's unique and creative, that's gets people thinking, and then that's where you can get a lot of reviews. But it probably does have to do a lot with like these other incremental marketing strategies as well. But I think the games that people hate, like people just uninstall right away. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or maybe I'll rage, say this is a terrible game, don't buy it. Maybe that's how you get high reviews as well. But it doesn't seem applicable here.
Well, a disagreement factor between Will and I'll point to the ARC games, as people will buy anything regardless of how well reviewed it is. So
the ARC games?
Yeah, ARC Survival Evolved. Remember the
ARC.
dino? Yeah.
Okay.
I think that like there was a recent release of that on Steam like a few weeks ago, and it's just been like overwhelmingly negative, but people are still buying it. So
Yeah.
I mean, Starfield too. I mean, that was another one.
Well, I mean,
I think it's mixed overall right now. I don't actually remember.
I mean, like there's definitely like feedback loops, and I'm definitely not an expert on like Steam game release marketing strategy in any means. That's why we have Huw here to correct us. But my intuition and understanding of it would be that it's definitely kind of feedback loopy of like, if a game is overwhelmingly positive on Steam, then it's more likely that people will buy that than something that's like, it's, I don't know, like 70 or 80% positive review score.
Definitely. I think that definitely plays a factor into it. I think what Steam does with the overwhelmingly positive rating, you need to have a minimum of 500 reviews total to get overwhelmingly positive. And they've got a recent reviews and a total reviews section for every game. But if you haven't had more than 10 reviews in the last 30 days, you don't get a recent review section. So that you can usually tell if a game is really not very popular if it doesn't have a recent review section. Or if it was a game that used to be popular but maybe isn't anymore, you can tell by the fact that it won't even have one of those because there's not been that many people checking it out and talking about it. And then I think if you've got less than 500 reviews, the maximum you can get is like very positive or something like that. I think it's limited. And then I think you need to get the threshold is 95% of them need to be positive for it to be overwhelming. Anything above that counts as overwhelming, which on a smaller scale, one bad review can really throw you off because you need to 5 out of 100 have to be negative minimum, or sorry, maximum. Anything beyond that and you've lost it. And I remember when I first started, Warsim had 100% positive rating for the first like 100 reviews. And I remember every day I would refresh the Steam page with so much anxiety in my chest, like, oh my god, because it's got to happen, right? And there's always going to be someone that doesn't like things. You can never please everyone. And it finally happened one day, and I was like, instant like loss of like 3 or 4% of my score there. But
oh no, yeah, it's the stats behind that are super interesting because it's like when building out. So the data set that we have that powers the podcast, I do like a scrape of titles from SteamDB, and then I make API calls to the Steam backend and pull all this data and stuff. And it's very much a hard question of like, well, what are the best games? Like how do you qualify like what are the top ones for us to even consider talking about? And like the two axes that I was playing along with at first were just like number of reviews and what percent positive they were. And I was doing a very simple thing of like, just uh combine those two with like a Pythagorean optimization, just like basically just find the hypotenuse of the triangle, those two numbers. Um, and then the more I was looking into it, like the site steam250.com has a bunch of
Mm.
these different ranking algorithms that they tested out. And SteamDB also has their own ranking algorithm that like take these into account of like, Steam's method of yeah, like for these conditions of like if you meet this review threshold and you're this positive, then you're in this quadrant of the positivity matrix. That's fine, I guess. It's probably easier to grok than like all these different numbers and formulas for the average consumer. But like for ranking things in a spreadsheet, like I've wound up using the SteamDB one, which is like basically takes like the number of reviews and normalizes it to the percent positive. Like they have a whole thing on how it works and stuff, but I feel like that one has been the most well balanced because it just gives you a number at the end of the day. It's like, oh, on a
Mm.
scale from like 0 to 1, how good is it? Question mark. And I've been following similar Hugh to your bemusement of like refreshing the review score every day. I've been following this one game, this one indie rogue game on Steam that has a very I don't know, like maybe polarizing art style question mark
Okay. Interesting.
called The Void Rains Upon Her Heart.
Ah,
And
yeah, yeah.
this is a game. It's a rogue style bullet hell side scrolling shoot 'em up type game. But
Has that not got 100% positive reviews, if I
it
recall?
yeah, in my data polls throughout the year, it had always been like 100% like zero negative, zero negative, zero negative. And then I want to say like recently it had, let's see, I'm looking on Steam right now, it has 2 negative reviews. And that's
Scandal.
enough to like uh on Steam it says it still says overwhelmingly positive, 99%. But yeah, it's like this weird kind of mentality that puts people into a space of like, oh, I have to be in these upper tier bracket of like this
Mm,
specific category. And if I fall out of that, then oh my God, the world's ending kind of a deal. And you're right that like at lower review volumes, that can be much more impactful. Where if you have a game that maybe
definitely.
only 500 people are gonna review, every review counts. And yeah, it can be very scary if you get review bombed for whatever reason or things like
Definitely.
that.
Yeah, you don't want to piss off a more than one person at a time because then you're having a real bad time. Well, funny you say about Steam 250. I remember like quite a while ago, actually, which is how I was aware of Void Raids Upon Our Heart. I used to watch the Steam 250 charts because Warsim didn't have that many sales, didn't have that many reviews, but it was still quite highly rated.
Mhm.
And I remember seeing, I think it was the hidden gems list, which specifically is for games that don't have that many reviews. And I remember seeing, you'd see a game that would just get one bad review and it would drop like 40 places on that list.
Yeah.
And I remember Warsim got a bad review one day and it was like down 13, and I'm like, oh, geez. So yeah, it really for the smaller scale games, it really does come fast. With just one person who doesn't enjoy them, and you do sometimes like I've seen some people that are serial bad game reviewers as well. There's one guy he left a bad review of Warsim, and then I checked his profile just out of curiosity, and every single game he owned, he had a bad review of. I respect the consistency there, like nothing personal.
10,000 hours, thumbs down. It was
Yeah,
okay.
not enough content.
Oh, I can't believe we haven't even broached this topic yet. This was one of the first questions I wrote down, and we're like 45 minutes in, and I haven't even asked it yet. ChatGPT.
Ah, yes, yes.
So Warsim, like very, very text-based,
Hmm.
very bespoke, and you can tell a lot of the heart of the creator comes out through it. But yeah, like ChatGPT has really like blown up the world for good or bad. Uh, and yeah, like what's your take on it as someone who's so much in like the text gamified space? Like, do you see it as like something to work with as a tool or
For sure.
something else?
I think if I'd started Warsim now with the same ambitions and vision, I think I would have completed it way sooner if I had GPT as it is now, even back then. I've already used it a handful of times for various different things when I'm like, okay, I wanna think of a bunch of item types. Here's thousands of item types I already have. Give me another 500. And what I found is obviously it's like having an instant assistant that's really sometimes bad, but but you can correct them and they can work through it. And I think I even asked it because I have hundreds of jokes in game, right? And I tried to come up with some myself. I tried to search the internet, find as many good jokes as I could that were fantasy themed. And I asked GPT to write me some based on the ones that I gave it. And there was a few that were actually quite good, surprisingly. And there were some that were really, really terrible. And they were really surprisingly bad. Like I couldn't wrap my head around but it was so bad that a human wouldn't have even made them. And so I gave them to a brain damaged gnome to tell in a tavern somewhere. So
Ooh, I
it
love
still
that.
stayed as content. But yeah, the power of GPT is pretty terrifying, and it definitely worries me a little bit. But hey, at least for the most part, it's accessible to everyone, right? So at least we've all got the ability to use it for whatever. But yeah, I think it's tremendously helpful. I think if you can use it for anything, then absolutely use it. For me, when I'm asking it to make me large amounts of things, what I tend to find is that my job becomes more quality control than anything. Because I'm checking what it's giving me, going, okay, that's not that good, or can we try again, but maybe with this. But the power of it is massive. If I'd had it all those years ago, we would have been looking at a different game. Maybe it would have lacked as much soul. I don't know, but GPT definitely it's definitely an incredibly powerful tool if you use it the right way.
Yeah, well, it's great that you have like all of the content over the years to feed into it as a grounding and say based on this stuff,
right?
Instead of just being like generate something from the void, which may not have
That's
been
true.
your own.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Didn't think about that really.
But are you, so it sounds like, I mean, like you can use it for like the actual content generation of the jokes and items and that sort of thing. But I wonder, are you using it? I'm guessing at this point you feel extremely comfortable writing the actual code for your
yeah.
But like,
Well,
are you using like a Copilot or any of like cursor.sh or any of these like AI assisted tool code writing tools?
I did dabble in trying to get GPT to write me a little bit of a Warsim mini feature, but my problem is that obviously Warsim is a mighty spaghetti that connects in many directions. So I can't feed 650,000 lines of code to GPT and tell it, hey, can you add this feature? Because I think it would just explode, and it probably wouldn't even take that text in. But but it in a very isolated space, I have managed to get it to do stuff. What I found was it wasn't really understanding things a little bit, and it was kind of hard. And then there was one point where I asked it to do something, and it gave me a chunk of code that just was instantly exactly what I wanted. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. That's wild. But it obviously a little small scale thing. But yeah, it's definitely doable. It's definitely doable. Probably would be even easier if I wasn't working in the world's largest bowl of spaghetti. But
yeah,
that is my fault.
And I asked this partly because one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you is I want you to inspire me to quit my job and become a solo dev. That's
hell yeah.
And so if you were to say, oh yeah, so with these tools, even an idiot like me can like learn how to build a beautiful app, and you can just hit tab. You say build this beautiful thing, hit tab, and then the code generates this perfect, flawless. And that sounds like great. I'll just get started right away then. But as it stands, it's certainly getting easier, it looks like. But
hell yeah.
To your points, can you have your entire code base in there? I'm not sure. I think like with Copilot, I don't know, Scott, if you
probably
dabble with this stuff, but like that's something where you can like have your entire repo, I think, in the whole code base, at least visible to the LLM. But I don't know. These are the things that I want to get excited at, like start building. And
yeah, that's a dream come true. Trust me, that I would love to be able to have an instant coding co-pilot that could create everything for you. Then it becomes like an arms race almost, doesn't it, to then try and create something good and fun. But
right,
yeah, it's definitely an amazing, incredible concept.
A lot of like really bad games coming out as people are using this that have never written games before.
Someone
like,
releasing a new game every 5 minutes.
Right, yeah. Just like, hey, write in that or write a game that does this, and you just like, a few modifications. There's one game. Next day,
or even better, hey GPT, write me an algorithm, write me a code that will write me a new game every minute using GPT. that's meta. that's I want to play that. But yeah. Well, you were saying about inspire you. If I was able to do this, then I'm pretty sure any person with a functioning brain could do anything, code wise or game wise. I followed YouTube tutorials, quit after the first 10, and just carried on with my very basic knowledge to build something ridiculous. And I think the only thing that I had that really helped me was persisting. And that's the only thing that maybe is the special thing, is persisting and obviously caring about the fucking community and talking. But the skill involved is not really very much at all. So if I can do it with my terrible spaghetti code, building a giant mountain out of small blocks of shit, I'm pretty sure you could.
Let me ask you this, because that persistence element is like a very important one, I think. And I think it does, as you pointed out earlier, have some relationship to community. So if you were to like plot your level of persistence over time with relationship to how large and engaged your community is, would you say that like, yeah, it was fine for a while, it was interesting to learn the thing, and then suddenly I got community feedback and it became like this passion project where it became
100%.
a meaningful thing, and that's where it really took off for you? Or was it just kind of more consistent all the way through?
Yeah, no, it definitely evolved. It definitely evolved a lot. It started off and it was a passion project because I was like, ooh, I'm making stuff happen with my own words. This is crazy. And then it was just a game for me. It was just fun. And then at some point, obviously, you can't do that forever, and it did sort of fade a little bit. And then there was people that were giving me feedback and checking it out on a really small scale. And I would get a comment every week, maybe. And that comment would carry me through to the following week. And over time, it started growing. And it got to a point where, if I was getting 20 comments on it in a day, which would be a huge day, obviously, that's fuel for another month for me. It was so exciting. And I think obviously to not, blow smoke up anyone's ass, obviously getting money for the thing as well was a whole extra thing that changed the game for me. And I think as soon as people had invested in the game and had bought a copy of the game and it was in early access, I felt a deep commitment to like, I can't drop this now. I don't want to create some abandonware or pull some of those Kickstarter campaign things that people have done. I want to see this through and actually deliver what I've promised and make something. And I think that was a big motivator as well. But the constant community feedback was invaluable. And I think probably the strongest fuel for the longest amount of time. And it's never faded really. I still feel like really excited whenever I see a new review. I check almost every day. I have a little check, search for the latest reviews, check on Reddit, Discord, whatever, and see what people are saying. And it always makes me happy. I still sometimes feel like I'm being punked, but yeah, it's beautiful. It has not faded, and
Yeah,
it's been a long time now.
And that like this is, as you continue to work on this is like a legacy project that even long after you're gone, like this game will still exist and be available. And as is proven by the fact that it doesn't have intense graphics, like it won't matter if graphics become the most intense, like VR experience, everything turned up to the max, because it turns out that the fun is not a function of like graphics alone. And so
I don't know, mate.
This,
I feel
this
like
should stand the test of time, but ostensibly that should be the case.
it could stand the test of time unless there's a Windows update that comes out and removes CMD. In which case is bye baby then. Back to bar work. But yeah, hopefully not.
Well, are there
Bill Gates? Don't do it. He's an avid listener to this podcast, I'm sure. So Bill,
noted fan of
do not pull the plug on CMD. I'm telling you now, man.
Indeed. Are there any games that you play like outside of doing Warsim dev stuff that you feel like deserve more attention?
Oh yeah, so many, to be honest. So many games. I feel like it's really kind of a curse sometimes when you get into developing and you learn how to expand on things and you can indulge in your own, I want to add this, I want to do this, and see other games. You're like, wow, they've got such an amazing thing in their hands here. Like if I was the lead of this team, I'd be doing so many things with it. Like there's just so many amazing games out there, so many different projects. It would be really hard to pick one, to be honest. I think sometimes it's like you look on Steam and you're trying to find a good game and it feels like there's a drought and it feels like there's just absolute crap everywhere. And I don't know, other times you see these amazing little passion projects being made and there's just so many things being built and bubbling up. Really would be hard to pick one, to be honest. To not cop out on that.
Can we just ask for like some favorite games then that maybe you've personally enjoyed?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I go through phases a lot of games, so I'm quite enjoying playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3 mods at the moment. That's always a fun time. I still can't wrap my head around how they've built something that is so massive and yet so malleable. It's pretty crazy, pretty impressive. A guy that I'm kind of pen pals with is working on a game called Worldbox, which is a god simulator. And that game, he didn't put it on Steam. And I was like, why? Put it on Steam, man. Put it on Steam. And it's doing really well on Steam now. I'm pretty sure he's living his dream. But that's a really cool game. And I wish he would update it more, but I understand it's because he's cooking and he's building. But I'm always waiting for more because it's a really addictive thing to watch. Quite therapeutic actually. And then I've got a few internet pen pals that are working on a few different things. One guy that I chat to worked on Streets of Rogue,
Ooh.
and Streets of Rogue is an absolutely incredible game, and he's working on an open world sequel, which I think is going to be probably my most anticipated game of the year when it finally comes out. And I'm trying to think who else we've got. There's always some cool stuff.
I gotta ask you, have you played there's another, it was another solo dev project, at least it started out that way. It's a Kenshi, maybe it's a game you've heard of.
Kenshi, yeah, sorry.
And it reminds me a lot of Warsim in many respects.
Yeah, well, I found Kenshi many years ago, and I tried to play it, and I don't know what happened, but I just really did not get it. I just really couldn't vibe with it, and so I quit, uninstalled, got a refund, and then I ended up checking it out years later, and something just clicked in me, and I played it for 300 hours straight. And not to unpg your podcast, but so in Kenshi you can harvest your own hash in the swamps, right, and build your own little drug empire. And in real life, I went and acquired some hash just so I could really roleplay the game. That was how much I was into Kenshi. I really loved it. I even added the character Beep, which is a sort of bug person who they're connected to a hive, essentially, as one of the civilizations in Kenshi. And he's disconnected from the hive because of his brain damage, so he's unable to be part of the hive mind. And so he just walks around saying beep. And absolutely incredible goat character. And I added him to Warsim in a little shack that you can find in the middle of nowhere if you explore the proc gen exploration system I added a few updates back. And I had a lot of Kenshi fans being like, "This is the crossover I never knew I needed."
I mean, that's delightful. I didn't realize that was a thing, but that is utterly delightful.
Yeah, huge fan of Kenshi. I'd love to meet the guy that developed it. I think absolutely outstanding effort. He made something that has no business being able to be done as a solo project. It sounds like one of those bizarre ambition things that people would say, "Oh yeah, I want to make a game that's hugely open world with a crazy world that's like Morrowind, but you've never seen anything like it before. It's much bigger. You can build a whole civilization, all this other stuff." Not achievable, surely, by a single person, and yet he still did it. I think his name's Chris something, but absolutely amazing effort. Genuinely incredible.
He's working on a Kenshi 2 right now, by the way. Not the saying that you should be so inspired, but
Kenshi 2 is cooking, and it'll be very exciting when it finally drops. I don't know how long it'll take, because I imagine it's going to be as monumental as the previous one, but with even more. But he's got a team now, I imagine.
Yeah, I think so.
All those Kenshi millions. And too right, good luck. These are the kind of game studios we need, ones that are developed by people that have started with something crazy and then go on to build these incredible, wild things. So I love to see it.
Well, I think that does it all for questions on my end. Will, did you have anything else you wanted to?
I check my notes here. I mean, I got all my gushing out, at least most of it that I needed to here, and I can't go too over the top, but it's
why not?
It's really great to have you on here.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, no, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the pod. Is there anything that you want to promote or shout out?
No, not at all. Why not have a moment devoid of capitalism?
Excellent. Perfectly good idea. Warsim Bitcoin coming soon.
Warsim Bitcoin coming soon. Got the DLC dropping in a week. It's gonna be one of 700 DLCs that I'm dropping. That's the best part. They're procedurally generated. They all cost $50 each. It's just free real estate.
Excellent. Well, yeah, thanks again for coming on the pod. Come back anytime. We'd love to have you.
Oh, hell yeah. My absolute pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to ramble about video games and passions. Anytime.
All right. Well, that was our seamless transition from our interview back here to our I guess main part of the episode, question mark.
What a good interview. I should probably listen to
it. Will was on deck for our interview part, and Colin and Andrew sadly had jobs to be working at the time, so we've kind of spliced this out into two different parts. But
yeah, I'm probably as excited as the average listener to listen to the interview, because I haven't had a chance to to hear it yet. So
Well,
I'll have
it's
to, yeah.
yeah. We talk about all sorts of wacky stuff, from marketing strategies to ChatGPT and everything in between. I mean, if you've made it this far in the recording, you know exactly what we were talking about. But now for what everyone has come here for is listener email. Bum 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 bum. I've decided to kind of take some emails that were more sort of long-winded that we've been getting and put them here in our special episode to give them some much needed attention. So without further ado, we have our first email come in from, gosh, how do I pronounce this? The BIGE, the Beige 23
The
writes
Biggie.
into the Biggie.
I like Biggie. The
Biggie.
Biggie 23.
Biggie's writing
It's a
in.
bit of a flow.
Writes in and says, how much of a roguelike slash roguelite do you feel you need to complete before covering it? Many games in the genre have secret levels or bosses or require numerous wins to get the full experience. So when do you feel you've seen enough to give the game a fair shake?
Ooh, this is a great question. A great question that weighs heavily on my mind. I've considered this, and you're kind of there are some issues with like not wanting to spoil yourself potentially. I feel like, yeah, what is reasonable? I mean, it varies from game to game, right? It just depends. Um, but I mean, sometimes, when a game's just not gelling with someone, like, we're not gonna expect our fellow pod members to, just power through it. Except for in the case of Dead Cells. Will really should have tried to play that for at least
Longer than 10
a
minutes?
good 2 hours. Come on, two
Yeah,
hours
yeah.
minimum. Just because, like, I gotta assign a value. I'm gonna say like 2 hours, 2 hours minimum.
Got to get in under
Let's
that
say
refund
that
window,
two
right?
for the sorry, I'll let you all give your answer as well. But I would say that the measuring stick that we're using here is just like a for fun podcast that we enjoy
Yeah.
making, and we don't want it to be unenjoyable. So if
Were
one of us
being
is playing a game
paid,
and they're you're not liking it, that's fair.
if we were being paid to do this, I'd feel more guilty about the length of time that I played on some of the games, but I mean, I view this and have always viewed this as kind of a video game book club type thing where it's the 3 or 4 of us playing a game and then talking about it, and we get in as far as we manage to get. And I usually try and do at minimum like 5 to 10 hours. I feel like that is usually a good amount of time to get a feel for the game, enough that you can at least talk about it. Obviously, more would be better in most cases because secret levels, bosses, numerous wins, etc. Like that's something that we often don't get to in these games. So really, we're more getting a taste of these games a lot of times. And I think that in some ways, roguelikes are the perfect genre for that because there are runs and you can get an experience doing a full run without having to play like a Baldur's Gate level 100 hours to get the full experience. But there's definitely games where we're not getting the depth of experience that people who are really into the games are getting. And I know that affects our ratings in a lot of cases. Like the RimWorld episode most recently, where Will and I had played extensive hours of RimWorld, and like the things that you guys are talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't even remember not knowing how to do that.
Right.
So like I'm rating this game on a level of competency that you can't expect someone to have after 5 hours. So like there are definitely certain aspects of the games where I bet you they either shine or become repetitive if you play them the full amount of time. But I mean, we've got 2 weeks and full-time jobs and other commitments of life and other games that we want to play. So
It's hard enough
That's
to
right,
get
and other games.
And other
it's hard
games.
enough to get adults to do anything, let alone commit to like 2 hours throughout 2 weeks to do something. But yeah, I think like I think you hit it right on the head with like for funsies and like the run-based nature of a lot of these games. Like if you can kind of grok the idea within like a run or two, yeah, like you could probably make some blanket judgment on the face of it. There are a lot of games that like compound with like meta progression as you unlock stuff. And I feel like I'm glad that I stuck with Gungeon through that process because I felt like I kind of bounced off it pretty hard to start with, but I knew that it had that kind of like, oh, okay, I know that like lots of people spend a lot of time in this game. There's got to be something to it. Maybe I'll just keep grinding away at it, and I can just got over that hump just barely, and I could see the vast horizon in front of me of gameplay possibility. But I think also when we were picking our algorithm for picking games, maybe algorithm's too generous, our weird, bizarre pick them out of a hat method of how we were picking games at the start of this podcast was very much like, oh, here's 3 games we've never played before. Let's pick one of these 3 random things we just drew out of a hat. Um, and in particular, our Shattered Pixel Dungeon, I think, caught some flack for that because we picked that one over a couple other games that we had never played. But that's a game that like has a lot of that kind of discoverability and stuff to it. Where yeah, you play through it once, like you'd maybe see like 5 to 10% of what the whole game has to offer. But again, if it's like a game that we're kind of coming in blind and we don't really have any knowledge of or muscle memory for, and we kind of bounce off it hard, I feel like yeah, like those games early on maybe had a little bit of an uphill battle. But now I think with what we're doing, where we kind of come to the table with something of like, oh, I want to talk about this game because blah.
Yeah. I
It
feel like
gives
you need to
us
have at least one person advocating for the game
Mhm.
in order to like get past it. If all of us have like not the best first impression of it, and you need that like person be like, hey, I really like this game. You're like, huh, well, if Scott likes it, then I feel like I should give it another chance. First, like Warsim is the perfect example. Like hearing you guys talk about it and talk about how much you enjoyed the interview, I'm like, man, I really feel like I should go back and play Warsim again. Like, was I wrong? Like, Will likes it so much, and I generally like games that Will likes.
Mhm.
Like, maybe I should go give it another shot. And like, you need that kind of someone needs to be there to advocate for that game, if you're not as into it, to
Yeah.
get you to keep going on it. So
And I think another aspect is that our very scientific set in stone ratings for this program are not set in stone in that we could change them at any time. And like my Luck Be a Landlord rating, I think when we reviewed the game was like, yeah, it was pretty good. And like since we did that episode of like I've been coming back to it more and more, and I've just been pushing that rating higher up on the chart. So there'll probably be some way for us to revisit that stuff later on. I mean, obviously with uh playoff style things at the end of the year will give us a chance to revisit things. But yeah, I think like having the ability to be flexible with our mindset and being able to change those rankings over time as we come back to things is another kind of level of flexibility that we can say like, well, yeah, I only spent a few hours in that game before, but maybe I should come back to it. And maybe my opinion on it has changed with different games that we've played along the way, kind of a thing.
Sure, sure.
yeah.
But Colin, real quick, going back to what you said, the number that you stated, 5 to 10 hours. I agree with that insofar as that is an ideal amount. Like I'd like to
Sure, yeah.
do 5 to 10, but that's not always possible. And in the question it says like, when you've seen enough, when do you think you feel like you've seen enough to give it a fair shake? Fairness is definitely in my mind when I'm playing these games, and it's more in my mind when it's a game that I'm not particularly enjoying. So I find myself in a tough spot. It's like, am I being fair to this game? Should I push forward and push myself to play more of it? Yeah, it can just, it can be kind of tricky. Because it's like, I don't know, the good game, oftentimes I'll be like, well, I'm enjoying this right out of the gate, and I feel pretty confident, but like,
Oops,
it's
30
hard.
hours.
It feels a little harder to pass judgment on,
Mhm.
when I'm not feeling it so much.
And some
I
of these
also-
games,
I feel like as long as we're kind of like transparent about how much we actually played the game, you're like, yeah, you know what? I only got 2 hours into this game. I didn't care for it that much, but if there might be more content if you manage to like get more into it and dig into its depths more. So I feel
Yeah,
like if
and
we're
that right, and that's another thing. And I totally respect, folks who are fans of a game that gets covered and, you know,
yeah,
um
our opinions are
or maybe
probably
not super
wrong.
happy that, there hasn't been that, some of us haven't played it to the maximum amount. It's like we'd love to, but not always it's not always tangible. It's not always
The
reasonable.
the data set that I always reference, that's up on the GROGPOD website. One of the things that I have in there is the playtime percentiles for each of the games in it. So you can
Mm.
go in and you can see like here's like the 10th percentile amount of time that people have played. Here's like the 50th, 90th, and it gives you kind of a spectrum of like, oh, this is how uh deep the game can go. And so for things like, let's say, I'm just looking through some of the ones on this list, like Dead Cells, like the 50th percentile of playtime is like 65 hours. That seems about right. Obviously, probably hard to do in 2 weeks with a full-time job. But I think like if you played it, like the 10th percentile is like 10 hours. I feel like 10 hours, you could probably see a lot of that game. And the 90th percentile is 247 hours. Like it's got some long tail to it. Something else like Binding of Isaac, that has a 50th percentile, 464 hours. So
Wow.
kind of a lot. There's a lot of engagement there. But at the same time, like I feel like if you play through 2 or 3 runs of Binding of Isaac, you kind of got the idea, right? You sort of know what the game is about and how it plays and stuff. I don't think you need to necessarily spend 1,000+ hours on it to quote really get it, but there are games that do have that much longer tail to them than others. Um, and yeah, like some of them are just bottomless, but some of them you can kind of, even with those bottomless games, like you can kind of get the idea of them from the get-go pretty quickly with that cyclical nature to them.
I think of like something like Rocket League.
Mhm.
You could play a game in 5 minutes, be like, wow, this is hard. You played a couple more games, and you know what Rocket League is. You could keep playing it for 700 more hours, but like you get the gist of the game very quickly.
But
You kind of judge it.
do you know what Rocket League is unless you've done 25 hours of acrobatics training? I mean, that's where the real game begins.
Sure.
All right, let's move on to our next email. This
Which
one,
which direction are we moving in? Are we moving one
uh,
way, perhaps?
yeah, that's a good point. This email comes from, let's see, yeah, so hi GrogPod hosts. I'm Rel. I used to play quite a bit of One Way Heroics. This episode, the One Way Heroics episode that we did in the past, convinced me to tune in for the first time. I didn't think anyone would be talking about One Way Heroics in 2023, so thanks for sharing your experiences with it. Enjoyed the chat. Some things I'd like to mention. One Way Heroics 2 is in development, exclamation mark. It has been since before 2020, I believe, by the same singular dev Smoking Wolf, who also goes by the moniker Silver Second. Looks like it retains some of the, quote, encroaching wall of darkness concept, but you're moving across a hexagonal grid now, and there's deck building mechanics, question mark. Rel goes on to say, One Way Heroics, music problem on the Steam Deck. Yes, I mentioned this as a thing that was kind of frustrating me a little bit. It's a problem with translating a Windows game to play on a Linux-based platform, SteamOS. There is a fix, but you'll need to read a bit, and they've sent a link to a Proton DB fix that I guess maybe I'll post that in the show notes. But yeah, they go on to say, yes, the Mystery Dungeon series games are very much worth your time. I've played the Shiren and Pokemon variants and I have some thoughts. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is a bit too watered down, in my opinion, for a roguelike, but the stories are nice. And hey, it's Pokemon, cute monsters. Most importantly, unlike the mainstream games, you get to be a Pokemon. This spin-off series is entirely human-free, and it kind of works in its own charming way. The most recent entries on the Switch, a remake of the very first Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Love the picture book art style. And I guess there's a downloadable demo for it as well. Maybe downloadable for a Switch. They go on to say, Shiren of the Wanderer is hands down one of the best, all caps, when it comes to roguelikes that you can play with a controller. A lot more punishing than Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, very item-based. You can do creative things like melding different equipment together to make them stronger, and it has a unique mythological slash folk tale Japanese setting. Shiren the Wanderer, the Tower of Fortune and Dice of Fate, yes, ridiculous game title. Most people just call it Shiren 5, is the most recent entry, has gorgeous sprite work, definitely worth a try on Steam, Switch, and PS4. The first Shiren title came out in Japan only on the SNES, but there's a remake of that on the Nintendo DS, and it also is the very first Shiren title officially released in the West. I personally prefer this title. It's a lot more succinct relative to Shiren 5 and elegant as a roguelike. Definitely try it if you can find it. The Shiren series, in particular, Shiren 1 on the SNES, is a cult classic for the Japanese player base. There's even a small speedrunning slash racing scene with some of their runs up on Twitch. Sum up, there are also Mystery Dungeon adaptations of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, the latter being the very first Mystery Dungeon game in the series. A remake of the third Final Fantasy adaptation, Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon, everybody, Buddy, is on Switch and also might be worth your time. Apologies for my rambling, and thanks for reading if you've made it this far. Looking forward to more roguelike chat. Regards, Rel.
No apologies needed. Rambling, come on. You're talking to some full-time ramblers right here. Wow. One Way Heroics 2. Exciting times. Also,
Yeah, I would
say,
be
like, great. The dev has awesome monikers, awesome nicknames.
Yeah, I'm super curious about a One Way Heroics 2. It's and One Way Heroics is an interesting game because it does, I guess, technically in air quotes have a sequel in air quotes, in that there's who is it, Spike Chunsoft or something, like bought the IP rights, or it's like was it like Mystery Dungeon One Way Heroics 2 or something like that. It's like,
Oh, that's right.
yeah, it's like a sequel and everything but name, where it's like, it kind of looks the same, but it doesn't, it feels like it, well, I guess, I don't know. Again, I'm judging with 0 hours of playtime, like we just discussed. But I get the sense that it's one of those things where it's like, oh, inspired by One Way Heroics, but not quite the same kind of level of indie dev jankiness. Which is kind of what I'm looking for in a One Way Heroics too. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the different movement mechanics and deck building add to that kind of system. Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like it could be interesting. I like One Way Heroics has definitely been one of the more individual, unique games that we've played. Like, it is not like any of the, like, I remember when we were doing the playoff bowl, like, I don't even know what category this goes in. Like, it's kind of its own thing, and I appreciate that. And regardless of how much I liked it or not, I want more interesting, unique games to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a concept. So
For sure. And I'm looking at Rel sent over some links to some gameplay of the in development. OW H2. OW 2. And it looks pretty cool. It's like hex based. I dig the aesthetic. Very cool. Here for
but
it.
yeah, Colin, you kind of nailed it with like One Way Heroics being, it's not quite a traditional roguelike, and it's not quite something like Binding of Isaac. It's that mystery dungeon space that we really haven't explored yet. And like these Pokemon mystery dungeon games, I faffed around a little bit with Pokemon Red Rescue Team in a GBA emulator, and it's interesting. And I think I get what Rel's saying here about it being like more kind of like the Pokemon ones being more kind of cutesy, casual mystery dungeon entries.
That makes sense. It fits with this theme.
Yeah, that would make sense. And yeah, I've been kind of curious to try out Shiren because like the idea of like a Super Nintendo rogue style game just sounds so weird and whimsical that it would fit really nicely into that category of like weird, like still kind of figuring out what the genre is type stuff. Um and yeah, I guess like Shiren 5 being on Steam is interesting. A lot of these mystery dungeon games also seem exclusive to Nintendo platforms, and as I guess like we don't really have like a blanket statement of like this is a PC game only podcast. But it would be interesting to kind of dive into some of those other consoles. There's one that is a for sure stay tuned that had been PS5 exclusive up until very recently, Returnal, which God,
Yeah.
I think I have to upgrade my graphics card specifically to play. Um, but yeah, some of these that are like Switch exclusives, I'm like racking my brain of like, okay, how could we go about
Do you have a
procuring?
Switch?
I do not, but I
Andrew, do you have a
wonder.
Switch?
Yes.
All right, so Andrew, we
Hmm.
just have to all go to your house
Yeah,
and play
that's
on your
perfect.
Switch.
Come on
Because
down.
I don't, and I know Will doesn't either. So
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I might as well not have one. I never use it. Last time I
yeah.
used it was an ill-fated attempt to play in a Doki Doki Tetris tournament at PAX, and I got just totally wrecked. Yeah, we got one. So yeah, I could just like, play for a few hours and then pop it in the
Mhm.
mail and yeah, over the course of a 2-week period, I'll play a game. Probably, maybe, potentially.
Got to send it express. Yeah,
Express.
and there's a new Shiren game coming out in January, I think, also for Switch. But yeah, like fresh off of the production pipeline, which I think people are super pumped up about. So I think covering some game out of the Shiren series. I hear a lot of people always talk about the Chocobo or the Chocobo Mystery Dungeon games as well. Like that's like its own series too. Like there's so much of this mystery dungeon fork of the roguelite spectrum that's like that could almost be it's like its own entire podcast wing in and of itself. So um definitely a lot to explore there for sure.
Yeah, love chocobos. And a
Yeah.
chocobo-centric game sounds pretty radical.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this like I don't think that there's any way that I could play this besides stealing someone's Switch and playing it on. I'm probably not going to buy a Switch just for Chocobo Mystery Dungeon, but
Well, you don't have a Switch.
Well,
Christmas is coming.
I believe there were some Chocobo Mystery Dungeon games for the PS1.
I'll
So there are
find some emulator out
ways.
there.
Yeah, there are ways to utilize our PC power for that kind of a thing.
When was the first Chocobo?
When?
Yeah, was it Final? What
I mean,
Final
I think Final
Fantasy?
Fantasy 1 has chocobos in
Oh,
Does
it's
it?
even
in it,
back
I
into the
believe.
first one.
Let me just look over here at my copy of Final Fantasy 1,
Got a
autographed by
chocobo on the cover.
Sakaguchi. It should be noted. Certainly, I don't like to mention. I don't
Ooh.
like to bring it up. I'm pretty confident. I'm gonna double check though. Do a little research. I'll get back to you in a bit.
I don't
Yeah, this
remember.
Mystery Dungeon theater, Mystery Dungeon feels like it could almost be its own subgenre of some kind. Are these mystery? Is the term Mystery Dungeon copywritten? Does someone own that,
That's a great
or does it
question.
just happen to be in the naming conventions of all these
I
games?
think well, it was something that came up from what was yeah, like our writer Rel had mentioned one of the I think Dragon Quest games. There was like a Dragon Quest NPC that got spun off into their own game called Kowloon's Great Adventure: Mystery Dungeon. And that's what kicked off like, oh, like this is a whole genre now. I don't think that like I don't know if that's owned by Square Enix, but it wouldn't shock me because then you would have like the Final Fantasy crossover stuff. But that is where I believe the moniker comes from. And it's frustrating because I've always like penned in this, okay, in the future on the schedule we'll play Talon's Great Adventure and the SNES Shire in it as like this is the first foray into like console controller rogues. And for the life of me, I cannot find an English translation ROM of Talon's Great Adventure Mystery Dungeon.
Huh.
Uh, so I don't know if it would be inappropriate for us to play a Japanese text only game. I think Will speaks Japanese, but I don't know how well that would.
I mean, I
What if
think
we
Will
played
took
it?
Japanese in high school, so it's been a minute.
Well, we could maybe yeah, I don't know if you just like hold up Google Lens to your computer screen and use Google
Yeah.
Translate. That's pretty handy. I've got some breaking news. The archivists have returned an answer for us. It would appear that Andrew Harshman is wrong. In penance, I'm gonna have to throw away my copy of Final Fantasy 1. It wasn't until the second game that we got
Oh, okay, there you
chocobos.
go.
Yeah. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the series starts there.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever saw Chocobo in playing Final Fantasy 4 or 6, whichever is the one with the Magitech mechs.
Yeah,
Six.
good stuff, good
Wow.
stuff. Oh, that intro music. Ooh, running with your mech through the snow. Come on now. I've watched speedrun videos. Indeed. Oh yeah, mystery dungeon. Love a mysterious dungeon. That is some good stuff. I do declare. Um, huh.
I'm
Interesting.
guessing that it's
Well, yeah, we got
I
it. We got to get around to playing something mysterious and something that takes place in it.
yeah, where are roguelike mysteries? Like solve puzzles, solve mystery murders.
You know, in the original the first the point and click Blade Runner game
Yeah.
is actually like randomized to some extent. So it's like you are doing an investigation, it is a mystery, and it's like who's the mysterious replicant? Changes with each playthrough. So there is something like that. Just another little instance of how randomization can really add something to a game. All right, now what happens if we go to Steam here and we type in to the store Mystery Dungeon? What do we got? What do we got here?
There's a good
Oh, all
number
right.
of
Well, I'm just gonna
Yeah, there's a
skip
lot of
over the
them.
first few results. Interesting. Senpai and the Mystery Dungeon, you say?
yeah, we probably won't.
We'll
Well,
wish
we
list
got to
that for
keep this
later. Oh, right.
podcast G-rated a little bit.
Pardon me,
Visual novel.
Conan Exiles. I don't know if that's a mystery dungeon. Yeah, I want to see. Interesting. I figured for sure there'd be a couple games. Interesting. Huh. Well, yeah, well, a lot of info. Appreciate the email from Rel, and I also appreciate Rel offering some troubleshooting advice to Scott, because a key part of all of our episodes is Scott's Steam Deck corner. And if that's not working, if the games aren't running, then one of the key elements of the show was missing.
All right, I got some recommendations for Steam mystery dungeons
Okay.
that we could probably check out. Although, like, I don't know, some of these, like, again, we're playing with fire a little bit because of the Steam tag nuance. Oh my God, what is this one? Ugh. So the top ones, for sure, stay tuned. Crypt of the Necrodancer, I guess, could be a mystery dungeon in some sense. There's a game that I guess I don't know how. I feel like this game is probably pretty roguey inspired, called Reventure. It's very much a like random, not maybe not for random's sake, but like looks like almost like a bottomless sandbox, kind of in a vein of, I would guess, Noita, maybe. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'd have to dive into it to be absolutely sure.
Whoa. 100 different endings, it says here. Woo!
Can you imagine? We got One Way Heroics, obviously. We have a game that, again, is this a mystery dungeon? Maybe. The World is Your Weapon. This is one that like always crops up as like being at the top of like very highly rated, and like debatably is like, I think this game is also tagged as a traditional roguelike, which I don't think that's technically true. I think this is definitely more of a mystery dungeon end of the spectrum. But it is grid-based. It does look like it's turn-based. So
And developed in RPG Maker.
yeah.
Cool.
I think
We
One
can
Way
ping
Heroics
it.
was also no, that one was that his Smoking Wolf's own? Anyway, what else we got in here? We got Shattered Pixel Dungeon, our fave from before, and then we have a long list of weird hentai, yeah, nude and sexual content. Yeah, so those first three we talked about were probably worth
Yo, the world is your weapon. They mean it. We got swinging around a fridge,
you can pick up a house and
Um,
smack someone with it.
swinging around houses. Hey, that's pretty groovy. The housing market, am I right, folks? Yeah, well, hey, this could be a whole episode defining what a mystery dungeon is, history of mystery dungeon, solving the mystery of mystery dungeon. That's what I'm saying. Exciting stuff.
Indeed, indeed. All right, I think that's going to do it for long-winded emails this time. If you, dear listener, are A, still listening, kudos to your endurance, or you're stuck in traffic. If you would like to write in your own long-winded email for us to read on a special occasion, you can send that in to grogpodzone@gmail.com. I do make sure to read all the emails, and I try to respond to them, whether or not if we can fit them into a nice attempted hour-long segment is another question. But for shorter form comms, you can at us on Mastodon, everyone's favorite decentralized social media platform, grogpod at gamedev.place. That's where you can find us there. And you can find all of our rankings and data and other episodes and tags and things and our results from the inaugural GrogPod Omega Bowl, our season recap from season one, I guess. I don't know if this is, I'll count this as also season one. Who cares? Grogpod.zone, the website. Yeah. Our next episode coming up, hot and fast here, is a Will pick. And although he's not here to give us a bit of a preview, Colin, what would you say about Rogue Tower to kind of whet people's appetite for our upcoming inaugural second season?
It's a good tower defense game, where the levels are randomized and the order in which you unlock towers changes throughout your course of your run. Sometimes you don't get all the towers that you want. And if you play it like Will and I, it ends up being spreadsheet madness as you try and input all the values and calculate what the actual perfect optimal run scenarios are. When should you upgrade your towers? What kind of magic? How much magic? Will's already posting graphs in our Discord. It's great. So stay tuned for that. We might have to get Will to post some of them graphs after the next episode.
That's what the show notes are for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our winter special. Go and grab some nog. Go and fire up, heat up some Glühwein for us. And we'll play out this episode with some more music from Huw's solo dev game Warsim, but this time an 8-bit version from our favorite text-based colony sim. We'll see you next season.